Well, Graham Hutton from School Leaders Scotland, thanks very much for joining us at the Herald today.
Okay.
Can we just start off for our readers or viewers, and you can tell us what is School Leaders Scotland and who do you represent?
So School Leaders Scotland represents heads, deputies, business managers and faculty heads in secondary schools across Scotland. So we have a membership of about 12 to 1,500 at the moment. It has increased over the last 10 years from 600, it's certainly booming, and we try and make sure that we're looking after those promoted posts in secondary schools across Scotland, and of course looking after the young people. So we act on behalf of our members in secondary schools, but try to ensure we're looking after the young people as well.
And try and make so the people who are sort of not the classroom teacher necessarily that people think about, it's the people who are actually kind of running the school environment.
Yes, it's about those in promoted posts who are have responsibility for leadership in the school.
Okay, so we talk
secondary schools.
Right, yes, and we talk a lot, obviously, about there's a lot in the press in the last few years about teacher workload, the pressures on the profession, but a lot of the time that does tend to focus on the pressure on a classroom teacher. So I think it's interesting to maybe hear the position for people kind of running schools, and you've just carried out a survey of your members, which you've very kindly let us have a look at, and some of the information in it is pretty challenging, really. For people at home then who maybe don't have quite as good a grasp of this as they would for a classroom teacher, what are the big challenges for school leaders these days? What's really making their life difficult?
There's a lot of challenges at the moment, and these are challenges which are not just for leaders in school but for teachers as well, or new teachers in the classroom. But certainly the first thing is the main thing from our survey was that people needed more support with regard to ASN.
Okay.
And ASN provision. The number of young people who are being designated as ASN has increased incredibly in the last few years. In the last 3 years, it has got a number of applications from primary into secondary for specialised places has gone up by a third, by 33%, and the number of successful places in secondary schools has gone down by a third as well. So it's quite startling, and we are very concerned that these young people are not getting a fair crack of the whip. Now that is about resources, and we know that across Scotland the resources are meagre in many ways, and are getting very much stretched, particularly in certain local authorities where the huge local authorities like Highland and Borders and D&G, but we are concerned that the resources have not been put in place for these young people, which are increasing. Now that means actually boots on the ground, support workers and other support that needs to be in place to help and support these young people. I'm using the word support a lot, but it is about the support we give to these young people. We need to see an increase in that. We need to have a look at the budgets that are across Scotland for that, for education, because at the end of the day it's about making sure those young people find a pathway that will lead to some success. Education isn't just for education's sake, it's about making sure that young people have a career in front of them. And I was speaking this morning to people in Newcastle about going to university, and we both agreed, we all agreed there, university is not for everybody, and over 50% of our young people in Scotland don't go in there. So why do we not make sure that everybody gets a pathway that suits those young people? So it's getting those pathways is very important. I think it's also about managing the resources that we have. Our surveys showed that yes, school leaders feel they have been empowered over the last 5 to 6 years with regard to school development, with regard to the curriculum.
Yes, that's noticeable in the survey response.
Very much
We've got a lot of control over curriculum.
A lot of control over that, although that has been pressurised as well, because we can't have a wider curriculum. When I was a head teacher, I tried to make the curriculum as wide as possible to meet those natural pathways, and so we're introducing different courses that were maybe not SQA regulated, but gave the young person a push in the right direction for that career that they wanted to go in. But we don't feel, and it's not improved in 5 to 6 years, about control or empowerment of resources, i.e. budgets and staffing. And it's staffing which is really, at the end of the day, it's the teachers in front of the young people in the classroom that are crucial, and the leadership that takes that forward.
So I think this would probably surprise some people. I think lots of people in this country probably assume that if you're a high school teacher, you want to work at X school, that you apply to that school, you're interviewed by that head teacher, and the head teacher ultimately decides if you're the right fit for that school environment. people probably don't know much about centralised recruitment processes for secondary schools. And again, it's something that comes up in your survey. Do some head teachers, many head teachers, feel that these centralised recruitment processes are part of the problem? Are they causing issues in schools?
I think they are problem issues for some schools and some authorities. In many authorities, the jobs would be advertised individually. The head teacher, somebody from the authority, and a peer would be the ones who are involved in interviewing. And obviously, you choose the best person for the job who does the best interview, and you think will also fit.
So some places still do that.
Yeah, but in others, there are central, in particular regions. I'm not going to mention them who they are, but they have centralised, particularly for those coming out of their probation. Out of their NQT or whatever you want to call it, and after having done their first year, they are guaranteed a job, but they're not guaranteed a permanent job, and that's one of the issues that we're looking at as well. And that's when local authorities interview a whole batch of people, and then they're allocated to different schools, and that's where the head teacher feels they don't have the empowerment to choose the staff that they want,
and
also that the people involved don't always get a choice to which school they're going to go to.
So you don't know if somebody's necessarily going to the school that really does suit them best, because they've been allocated based on points and people at the council deciding where somebody goes, and your members feel they would rather have control over that.
So I believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. So something else that I think came out of it that I'd kind of like to touch on as well. There's a line in the survey where teachers talk about head teachers bothered by the relentless scrutiny of schools and sort of data-driven processes, this sense of constantly having to generate data to prove that things are happening and to be chasing this improvement agenda. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that has on schools? Why is it a problem if schools are facing, lots and lots isn't accountability a good thing in schools,
Accountability is a good thing in schools without any shadow of doubt, because we are responsible for the young people, and we have to make sure that we're doing the best job by them. And in the vast majority of schools that happens, and you probably see that through the HMI reports.
Yep.
But we are in a very data-rich society, and there's a lot of data that we can use to improve departments' performances, subject performances, schools' performances. But data isn't everything. We can't be data absolute. I don't believe we can be data-driven and to the because at the end of the day, it's about the young people. So, in my own personal experience as a head teacher, I would ensure that we looked through the data, we took the data apart, but we had to go behind the data to find out why was that young people. Why there's 3 people here who didn't pass? Who are they? Why not? What were the reasons for that? So it's all about looking at the young people, because at the end of the day, that's why we're there.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we use the data wisely, that we make sure we're reading it properly, and not all the data that reflects nationally reflects on an individual school.
Yeah.
Each school is different, and I know the HMI always say, we hear this every time, my school is different, my school is special. Yeah, every school is special, because every young person in that school must count. And therefore we need to look at the data in that perspective, in that situation which suits that school. And I've taught at schools at both ends of the spectrum, and yet I feel you can't always apply the same criteria to one school from another because of what the circumstances are. And they can be cheek by jowl with each other, but the situation in that local community has to be taken into consideration. And the feeling is from many members is that HMI do not always take into consideration the situation in a specific school, particularly post-COVID, and how COVID impacted on those young people in that school.
Okay, and so just a last one then. The only other thing one of the things that was in there that really stood out to me, I said the only thing, there's a figure in there where you asked head teachers how many of them have considered leaving the job earlier than they otherwise would have planned. And it's a really, really high number. It's well into the majority, isn't it? It's twice as many as said no. I speak to head teachers will commonly tell you that this is the best job in the world.
Yep. Would agree.
And yet, we've got a significant proportion of your members or head teachers saying that they are considering walking away from this job. Why do you think that is? And also, why is it such a problem? If we were to start losing head teachers at that kind of rate, if our readers and viewers don't really quite, maybe people think, well, that's fine, just replace them, there's other teachers, why is it an issue if all those leaders actually do start going, or even if they want to start going?
Being a leader is not just for everybody. I think you have to work. I believe you have to serve your time, you have to go through all the levels, and you have to come through your experience to be able to show how you can lead.
Yeah.
61% of our members have thought about leaving the profession or over the last year or so, and that was a startling figure.
Yeah, that's really...
They knew there was unhappiness, but they didn't realise it was so bad. But it is about the pressure of managing schools amid budget cuts, amid staffing shortages and unrealistic expectations, as we mentioned earlier, from outside agencies, HMI in particular, local authorities who have been under the cosh of the HMI as well in many, many ways. And it's also about unrealistic expectations from parents as well.
Yeah,
and that has changed. And we've kind of lost the social contract. Somebody mentioned to me down south about the social contract that was there between parents and schools and teachers and pupils. And that kind of broke down a bit during COVID, and we've got the resultant of a larger number of dysfunctioning young people, and a larger number of young people not coming to school because they sussed out during the pandemic that actually didn't need to be in school all the time to still get your qualifications. And therefore it raises the question is, what is education about? What's schooling about? So I think there's that pressure, there's a lack of resources, there's the fact that our partner agencies are more difficult to get hold of in many ways. Social work, CAMS, mental health issues as well, mental health agencies and whatnot. They're becoming more difficult to get, and they're snowed under as well. And therefore, schools feel that they're still being financed to teach and learn, for teaching and learning, but they're also now having to do mental health. Also having to do food banks, clothing banks,
social outreach work.
So when all these people kind of stopped dealing with young people during the pandemic, and due to the rules and regulations were on, teachers stepped up and haven't really stepped down. So it's all those unrelenting pressures. I think the emotional side of the job is very important as well. A lot of head teachers and leaders and teachers invest a lot of their emotional feelings into their young people. They want to see them do well, they want to bring them on, they want to make sure that they're doing the best by these young people. But there is a reaction, there's increasing violence in schools, particularly I think more in the primary than the secondary in many ways from what we hear. We know there's more dysfunctional parents who will not take no for an answer, and there's other things like the concerns about all this negative press about teachers is actually turning people against coming into teaching. And therefore we've got a reduction in the number of young graduates wanting to come into teaching. There's also a question about the quality at times, and also how do we make sure that people will step up to the mark to become a leader if they're seeing people wanting to leave. So it's a kind of catch-22 situation that we've got to we can't lie about what the situation is in schools, but we want to enhance the good points. And what a wonderful experience. And one of the things that came out of their career was the absolute positivity in many ways of what being a teacher means, what being a school leader means, and the difference that you can make to young people. And I think that's still something that resonates with most of my members, is it's about making the difference to our young people in Scotland.
So despite the pressures and despite some of the really concerning things in these reports that the Herald's going to report on, despite all of that, this is still the best job in the world?
Personally, I would say yes. It is about a commitment to young people, it's about commitment to education, and it's about making sure that we prepare our young people to make a valuable contribution to the economic life of Scotland. And we have some fantastic young people in Scotland, Scottish schools. We sometimes forget about that. We sometimes put an emphasis on where things are going wrong. And I think we need to I do believe in accentuating the positive. But there's so much going on. And you saw that from the exam results this year. There's an improvement. That gap, thank goodness, is beginning to close. it might close even more if we didn't have exams in National 5 level, as we've learned, if we had gone for towards the Hayward report, and which SLS is fully behind. And I think we need to really think about how do we actually assess young people, what are the courses that they're doing, and do they actually, is what they're doing in school, is their curriculum relevant to the 21st century? Because we're still doing hires, which were started in 1888. It's the gold standard. But Britain came off the gold standard 100 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
So maybe we need to think about what is the best way of assuring that attainment gap is measured. And of course, we've all looked at the higher results, the SQ results, but there's a whole load of other qualifications which will come out in the next couple of NPAs and whatnot that are not taken into consideration. So we need to have another look at what are the final results for 2025. Couple of months down the line, and then we'll find that the attainment gap is even narrower than it was.